Hi, welcome to our part one on how-to videos for point count methods with the Pacific Megascopes Research Alliance, PMRA. My name is Jeremiah Kennedy, and I am going to be showing you how to use our point count protocol. If the audio isn't fantastic, I apologize. Feel free to send me an email to ask any questions you have if I'm unclear in any way or you can't hear anything for some reason. I'm always happy to respond to those via pacificmegascopes@gmail.com, all one word. This is our website, and this is where you're going to be starting in order to complete your Western Screech-Owl surveys. Now, I have some other presentations that will become available soon on why one might want to do a Western Screech-Owl survey, what might be some of the experiences you might get from that, positive experiences, and what these Screech-Owl surveys are being done for. So I'm not really going to go into detail on that right here, but feel free to check out some of our other instructional videos for that information. And of course, our blog, which can be found here. In order to access the point count methods information, you will have to go to our website at pacificmegascopes.org, and you can enter methods, or you can go to point count methods here, and this will take you to this page. You'll find lots of information here for different resources on survey protocols, the Nocturnal Owl Survey, run by Bird Studies Canada, Nature Counts, and the Risk Standard Survey protocols. If you're interested in ARU survey protocols, those are being developed as we speak and should be out before. One version of them will be out before the end of February this year. All right. So in order to set up, to get ready for your playback survey, you're going to need some equipment to start off with. You will need your playback speaker. And in order to get the appropriate speaker, make sure that you purchase something that is going to be able to play a certain volume without distorting, getting scratchy, or making the sound, the call sound weird. This instructions on getting your speaker to play at 70 to 75 decibels can be found here in this video. And if you would like some more resources on that and you'd like to borrow playback speakers, again, feel free to reach out by email, then we'll try to make that happen. We currently have the audio file for the playback methods kept here on a drive. By the time you watch this, I may have already updated this into something that works a little better. People have been having issues with getting access to this. So what I'm going to try to do is just embed this straight into the site. And people can just download it directly from the site as a zip file. And the other things that you're going to need from this web page are your survey protocol and your datasheet, and you can simply click on these and they should download for you. If you're having issues accessing these, again, let me know. I can send you PDF versions of the most up-to-date stuff. And again, make sure that you watch this video before you go out and do surveys so that you can standardize the volume of the playback that you are presenting. Right. So let's say I've now downloaded this audio file and I've downloaded the survey protocol and the datasheet. We are going to open the datasheet and take a look at what that is. So the datasheet here is a two-part data sheet. You have one visit for maybe station 1, and then the next station 2. And if you double side print it, you can put up to 4 stations on the same page. The reason we have a lot of the modifications we've made from version 2 to version 3 are to make sure that this method works for the direct data entry system that is going to be used by Bird Studies Canada. Well, it's going to be used by this project and is hosted by Bird Studies Canada under Nature Counts with their direct data entry Nature Counts app. And we'll be testing that this spring. So hopefully by next spring, all of our volunteers will be able to use this method for their surveys. If you have any questions about this method and what's here and why it's here, and any concerns, do feel free to reach out. And we are trying to make sure that this method works for as many people as possible. So to start with, when you are doing a transect, that transect is probably going to include somewhere between 8 and 12 survey points. And those survey points should be spaced out at 800 meters as the crow flies to make sure you're not getting overlapping presentation of playback to adjacent birds before you show up in that territory. So if you play your audio of the screech owl display call and the next bird at the next point count hears it and starts singing, the information that you're getting by the singing time of that bird at the next point is misleading, because the analysis that we do, or the analyses that we do with this data, requires for those points to be considered independent. So you have your transect, and you're going to be doing a single visit at that transect. What you can do is enter the visit information for that evening at the top of this page, and then staple or paperclip all of those pages, the subsequent station information together, so that you might have a couple of pages of points from the same visit, and you don't have to re-enter this at the top of every page. But we have room for date, region or transect. So this will region and transect, sorry. So this will be a description of what that transect is. So let's say you're doing a transect out at Tofino Creek. So this would be Vancouver Island, Tofino Creek. And then the visit number. So is this the first time, second time, or third time you're going to be doing this in this given year, or that anybody is going to be doing this in this given year? Somebody may have visited this transect before you, so this would be visit 2 in that case. And again, it's really important for us to make sure that we visit these transects at least three times in a year, because this gives us information on detectability of individuals that we may not detect at different times because of weather or because of where they were in their territory at the time. So making sure we get multiple visits is very key. So protocol and project, this would be PMRA Basic or PMRA Western Screech-Owl Surveys, something that's descriptive, that tells us what's going on. So if that's what you're doing for using these data sheets for is the PMRA Western Screech-Owl Surveys, go ahead and just write that in. But if you're using these data sheets for another project, which we very much encourage, make sure you write something here that allows us to reference to, or anybody to reference to, a different protocol, to a clearly described protocol that has the modifications laid out, so that we can use that information to include that data in analyses, and that other people can access and use that data effectively. So you might write down, let's say you're using this survey protocol to do some behavioral stuff that requires different playback sessions. Then you might say Western Screech-Owl behavior, Western Vancouver Island, 2023, and then you'll have some descriptor that allows you to access that other protocol description as well. All right, so once that's all filled in, you have your station information. Station is going to be just a number, so it can be between 1 and say 12 or 13. It's the number in the transect that's in the GPS. Time start is the time that you start that 2-minute silent listening period at the beginning of your survey, and we'll go into that in a second. And that needs to be 24-hour clock. So say you start at 6 p.m. or let's say you start at 8:20 p.m. and you want to write down 2020, and that'll be in your 24-hour clock. Temperature from whatever temperature reader you have, thermometer, car thermometer, that kind of thing. What's the temperature outside? Wind in Beaufort. So that is going to be described in the survey protocol, as well as the associated cheat sheet for the surveys, which I should go ahead and grab here. Yeah, so here's the description of the Beaufort. This will be also downloadable. I think I neglected to put that up, but it will be also downloadable on the website as the Western Screech-Owl Survey reminder sheet. So this you can keep with you and has all of the descriptions of the different definitions. So you want to make sure that you have all of this information in the back of your head. But when you're out in the survey and you think, oh, what's the code for that owl? Or, oh, what is the Beaufort wind scale? Or I can't remember what the light measurements are, then that's available to you. So print that out, keep that with you. All right, so yeah. Temperature, Celsius, wind in the Beaufort, precipitation from 0 to 5. 0 is nothing, and precipitation 5 is extremely heavy rain, extremely heavy snow. Cloud cover, percentage of sky that is covered by clouds, and visible sky, percentage of visible sky covered by clouds. Moon, whether or not the moon is visible, yes or no. So in the case that you are this really is whether or not the moon is visible to the landscape. If you're under trees and you can't see the moon just because it's behind a tree, and if you walked out into a clearing, you could see the moon well, then the moon is visible. But if the moon is behind heavy clouds, so it's not visible, or is behind a mountain, then the moon is not visible. It's whether or not it's visible to a screech owl if the screech owl was sitting or any other owl was sitting out in the landscape. Moonlight from 0 to 5, other light from 0 to 5. These are the same light schedules, and I'll show you those in a second. And then noise level from 1 to 4, and these are all the ones that we're using that are also used by other groups like the Nocturnal Owl Survey protocols, the BC Nocturnal Owl Survey or the Canadian Nocturnal Owl Survey. They're the same methods. So if you know those methods, you know those levels, these are the same levels. We also have car count, and so this is the number of cars that will pass you in a survey. So just keep a tally going and write it in there. So this only really applies to roadside surveys. And then observers. Now, at the beginning of the data sheets, just like you would, or the beginning of the transect, just like you would write that down, all this information down at the beginning, at the top of the sheet, you also want to write down the names of the observers who are here, and then the 3-letter codes that are associated with those observers. And that way, we can, when you're writing in these next surveys down the transect, you can write the 3-letter codes. So if I was doing this, I would write Jeremiah Kennedy equals JCK, and then the observers would be JCK. Now, if I was with somebody, but somebody left partway through the survey, then I would need to make sure that the next surveys, I noted that there was only one person doing that survey. All right. So if we look back at this handy dandy reminder sheet, this has all of our definitions in here. So if we look at the weather conditions, we have Beaufort from 0 to 6. There are higher Beaufort levels, but once it gets up there, there's no way you should be doing a survey. So already 39 to 49 kilometer per hour winds is probably more than enough to cancel a survey. Precipitation. This is these from 0 to 5. The sound masking is basically whether or not you can hear you can hear regardless of the rain. So if the rain is light enough that you can't, it's not keeping you from hearing anything around you, then there's no sound masking. But if it's sort of roaring or a consistent dull drone of rain, then there is some sound masking. A torrential downpour, you should not be doing surveys in a torrential downpour. This would be sort of if you were doing a point and suddenly it started pouring rain on top of you, or it got heavier and heavier and you had to stop, and the last count you did was a torrential downpour. Cloud cover, yes, percentage of sky above you covered with clouds. Moon visibility, horizon and clouds. Light level measurements. So these are the 2 light level measurements. There's moonlight and then other light. And this light is basically from anthropogenic sources. So any consistent light around you, house lights, street lights, buildings, any light you're getting from surrounding industry, that kind of stuff. Moonlight is visibility because of the moon intensity. So this will help you, this level of 0 to 5 will help you decide what light it is. Don't worry too much about this. We're trying to standardize these measurements into something a little bit less subjective, but this is taking time. So we're trying this for now, and I'm hoping that this gives us a better idea of how this light influences owl behavior, because we know it certainly does. It's sometimes hard to tell anthropogenic light sources from moonlight, but just do your best, and you can use information from previous counts where maybe it was pitch black and there was moon still visible, and then you get to a little bit of an anthropogenic source, and it's quite, there's a lot of light around you. You can see pretty well. Most of that is probably coming from that anthropogenic light. So do your best, but don't worry too much about it. Noise, and this is again to do with sound masking. So anything at 4 is probably a bit too much to do a survey. So if you get a sound of 4, you can move, if it's a creek, for example, you can move over 20 to 40 meters. If you go more than that, then you definitely want to make a new point and suggest that we move that location. This may be a problem that pops up a few times. It's always inevitable in spring surveys in our region because there are creeks absolutely everywhere. Everything is riparian, it seems. And so don't worry too much about this, but just do your best to try to mitigate that. And if you can't, because of a big river that you're doing a survey next to, or a big road, a highway or something, just make note of what level that noise is. And then, of course, your car count. So if we go now to our, oh, that's not the one. We're going to go now to our species detections during the survey. When you start your survey, you're going to want to start a timer and you're going to want to start your playback. Your playback should have 2-minute silent listening at the beginning, and then that playback should start. So you'll have 0 to 2 minutes silent, and then a playback session of 1 minute, and then minute 3 to minute 7 is silent again for listening, and then 7 to 8, etc. for a playback of the owl vocalization, etc., etc., etc. It will end at 17 minutes, and your last session is a silent listening, a 4-minute silent listening period. So we look back here. This information helps you enter what you would like, or what you need to enter into the species information and detection information sections. So species, the 4-letter code for the species, sex, MFJ, so male, female, juvenile. Direction. So if you're unsure about any of these as well, you can go into the survey protocol description sheet, and this will give you all of the information that you need as well. So this section here is your station data, and then you have your observation data. Station data is what we talked about before, but your observation data and the bolded levels, the bolded words will tell you what is the headers of those sections. So species, 4-letter code, sex, time of first detection, and direction of first detection. So these 2 values here, first detection, this means that when you first detect the individual, whatever time you detect it at, you need to write down the direction of that individual in north, northwest, west, southwest, south, southeast, east, northeast. And then the time. Now, this is not the time in the 24-hour clock. This is the time within the survey. So if you detected this bird at 2 minutes and 30 seconds into the survey, you would write 2:30. And this would then mean that you detected that individual during your first playback, because we had 0 to 2 minutes of silent listening and then 2 to 3 minutes of playback. And so you would write in here the distance bin. You can see here it says distance bin 1 to 5 for each time frame. Now, this might not make a bunch of sense right now. It's going to make more sense with the direct data entry system. So if I go back here, you'll see below we have our distance bins. We've done this because people, myself included, are very bad at distance estimations when it comes to vocalizing birds. Birds can sing loudly and they can sing quietly. If we bake in a little bit of error into it, a little bit of a buffer into that, it may account for some of that error, and we don't have to worry about it so much. So these bins, you'll get to know them a little bit better as you do your surveys, represent how close the bird is to you. So the bird is between 0 and 50 meters, that's bin 1. Between 50 and 100, that's bin 2. Between 100 and 200, that's bin 3. 2 and 4, that's bin 4. And then, of course, 4 plus, that's 5. This is going to be astoundingly rare in your surveys, just so you know, because a lot of people, well, frequently people will write down very long distances of detection. It's probably because the bird is singing very quietly. It's very hard to detect western screech owls at a distance. Could also be because the bird is singing from across a lake, and that is why we have this information in here. Otherwise, I think we would have stopped at 200 plus, but adding that extra bin is valuable for us in case water bodies are carrying sound across them. So you're going to write these bins in here. Now, if you can't remember and you're getting frustrated with the bin system, don't worry, just write in your distance estimation and then replace that with the bin afterwards. So what I would suggest is if you have these bins in your mind, then you can say, okay, I think this bird was detected here. Let's say we detected it at 150 meters. I would say this is at 100 to 200. The third bin, maybe I couldn't remember which bin it was, but I remembered that it was 100 to 200. So I would write 100-200. And that's a little busy in here, but at least it gets the information across. So there we go. We have species, sex, and each one of these lines is going to be a different individual. The row is going to be a different individual for your survey. You may have two male western screech owls counter singing at each other, or two male barred owls, or a female barred and a female saw-whet, or something like that. Each individual, you will have western screech owl M, western screech owl M, will get its own row. And then you'll track that individual as it's vocalizing in response to the end. So now you have your first detections, and then you'll have your distance. If you look at 0 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 7, if you detect this bird vocalizing and it begins to approach you, maybe it gets closer to about 10 meters. We detected it first at 2 minutes and 30 seconds at between 100 and 200 meters, and maybe it comes in a little bit closer. Maybe it's now during this silent listening period, it starts the first time you detect it in this period, it's between 500, or it's between 50 and 100. So you would write bin 2. And then maybe you don't hear it during the playback and you hear it again in the silent listening period, and it's between 0 and 50. And so that's your closest bin, and it stays there and you hear it here. But so you would write, sorry, I'll go back here. You would write in this playback session, you would write 3, and then you would, in the silent session, you would write 2 because it came closer within that 50 to 100. And then you didn't hear it in here, so you don't write anything in here if you didn't hear it. And then you heard it again, and it was closer to the 0 to 50, so you write 1. And then you didn't hear it in the playback, and maybe you didn't hear it again at the end. So you don't write anything in these 2 bins if you didn't hear it. Now, you could hear it the entire time. Maybe it's singing continuously. You enter where you thought it was within those bins of distance, each one of these frames. If you have any questions about that, let me know. Once you get it, it makes a lot of sense, but sometimes it's a little bit difficult to internalize exactly how this works. So again, do feel free to send an email and I will do my best to describe. Do have a quick read through this protocol first, because I do go through some examples of how this might work in the protocol, and that might help. Breeding evidence is a new modification that we've done because of its consistency with the other breeding evidence codes for a lot of other research, bird research. Originally, we added a section called vocalization type, and that was just probably going to be a little bit too difficult for people. But this is somewhat similar to that. And in the case that you want to track vocalization types, please do note that in the observations. So for western screech owls, you might have the bouncing ball, or you might have the double trill, or you might have the TD-do. And you can write those things down in your observation notes. You can use codes, and then you can translate those codes down here. There's a lot of space to write things, and we do appreciate that kind of information. Now, with the breeding evidence codes, they're all kept in here for what might be applicable. These are based on one visit. So there's some codes that apply to having heard an individual vocalizing repeatedly at the same place. We're not going to use those because we are only using the breeding evidence codes from single visits, even though we're going to stations once, twice, and three times. H, if you see a bird, you put down H. If you don't hear it vocalize, you don't write, you write H. Now, if you hear some agitated vocalizations, but you know, you could have seen it, maybe you didn't see it, doesn't matter. That's your highest level of breeding evidence now is H, or sorry, is A, because it was making barks or chips or yips or bill snaps in response to your playback. S, heard singing primary or secondary songs. So for Western screech owls, this would be that bouncing ball or the double trill song. And for barred owls, that might be the Ho Cooks for You. And for saw-whets and pygmies, that would be the consistent toots and those little trills that the pygmies will do as well. Courtship display would be counter singing or caterwauling with the barred owls when they do that accelerating up, sort of back and forth singing, and that, so you know, with horns and with screeches. Now, if you hear a copulation display with either of these birds where clearly they're copulating, please make notes of this. I think this is going to still be D, but do make a note of that in the notes section, because that's helpful. And if you're not sure what the heck's going on, you're hearing a lot of noise, pull out a recorder, give it a record, get somebody's phone out, record on that, and we'll try to interpret at a later date. If you are seeing or hearing young, recently fledged, somebody comes in and makes weird noises and you see that it's a recently fledged young, or maybe you get to a station and fledged young are on the ground popping around. This has actually happened recently. It's unusual, but it does happen, so we have to have it here. FY, and then if there's young in a nest, NY. So you might hear screeching and you realize that it's, or begging, and it's coming from a cavity. You can put NY. Yeah. So that is your breeding evidence information. And that should give us information on what kind of vocalizations are occurring as well. And again, if you feel like putting in any additional information on what type of vocalizations were done, please do so in observation notes. Our final column here, aside from observation notes, which each one of these should be related to what's going on in here. The station notes, if it's conditions related or something to do with frogs singing too loudly, put that down in the station notes. The observation notes will be here. There's a lot of space down here. The observation notes are here for individuals being detected within the survey. Maybe there's something going on with this individual. You don't know if it's male or female, or you can't tell if this is the different bird, but you think it is. That can go in your observation notes. Now, this time playback stopped section is important for a few reasons. People, for a lot of surveys, are worried about barred owls predating upon, or larger owls generally predating upon smaller owls. This is, with Western screech owls, generally barred owls predating on the screech owls. Now, we don't have any evidence that this has taken place that I know of in a survey, but again, it would be next to impossible to actually observe this. Hopefully we'll get better information on this when we are able to look at our playback surveys in concert with our ARU data. I will reiterate something that I've said in the past, and I'd be happy to chat about this. In most areas where you have high densities of screech owl, or you have high densities of barred owls, and you don't have that many screech owls, and you're worried about detecting, you know, a screech owl and then bringing a barred owl in. If you hear barred owl, barred owls are going to be on most of your points and most of your transects in a lot of those areas, or at least they're going to be near a lot of your points on a lot of transects. And hearing a barred owl is actually probably it is in a case the least likely to predate upon anything that you bring in with your playback. So if you hear a barred owl at a distance, please, we would suggest continuing to play. If you hear one very, very close, let's say it's singing right above you within 20 meters or something like that, then you might want to think twice about continuing to play your playback, especially since the screech owls in an adjacent area may not be as interested in responding now. So you may want to just complete that count silently. Either way, no matter what you decide, we at PMRA will suggest that everybody continues to play playback except in extenuating circumstances. If you detect a screech owl, please continue to do playback, because you may detect another screech owl. You may be on, you may detect a female, you may detect an additional male that's around. It's important for analysis for these surveys to be of the same length. Otherwise, they're really hard to analyze. Now, we can start incorporating this information into our analysis if people track the time that the playback was stopped. This has not been done in the standard form until now. So please write the time within the survey, so from 0 to 17 minutes, at which you stopped playing playback. Continue to listen for the rest of the 17 minutes. Don't leave your station, otherwise it's an incomplete survey. But do write down, if you decide to stop for whatever reason, that you have stopped, and just write in here what time you stopped. Observation notes. This will really only be applicable to the top one, because you're presenting only one playback. So write it here. You don't have to write it in all the columns. Observation notes are a great place to write why you, actually it would be either one. You could write it down here too if you want station notes. Station notes, observation notes, don't mind. Just write down why you stopped playback. If it was barred owl, if it was screech owl, if it was, you know, a goshawk in the tree next to you and you're playing just after sunset and there was still actively hunting birds that showed up. Yeah, please do write that down. Now, in a lot of the places that we're going to be doing surveys for the next few years and that we're focusing a lot of our effort in, there are actually very good populations of western screech owls. And if we use the method of stopping when we continue to play, use the method of stopping playback whenever we detect a screech owl, this could be really problematic for informing us for getting complete surveys that we can compare against other surveys. So if you are on the west side of Vancouver Island, on the Central Coast, in areas where you're expecting to get detection rates of, let's say, 4+ screech owls, or maybe even three stations, at least 3 out of 10 stations with screech owls on them, please continue to play playback throughout the survey, regardless of what you hear. With, you know, in extenuating circumstances, when you have a very quietly waiting barred owl behind you, or a barred owl that's singing in your face within the same tree, or 2 screech owls that are looking extremely agitated or something like that. You know, in extreme circumstances, you can stop and write down why you stopped and when you stopped, but generally, please continue to play the entire time. Most of the reasons that people want to make sure that these surveys are done these surveys are, the playbacks are stopped for threat of predation are from areas that there's a lot of barred owls and not a lot of screech owls. So if you're in a place where you find there's quite a few screech owls, please do continue to play, because otherwise we won't get that appropriate information to be able to fully understand screech owl densities across the landscape. And that could be more detrimental in the end than threat of predation, hypothetical threat of predation of a handful of individuals. So having said all that, this is available for use. We suggest people use it sparingly, but if you do want to use it, if you do want to stop playback, do write down why you did and when you did. We have datasheet entered by. This is going to be once you've entered your datasheet, or I've entered your datasheet, this is going to be signed by whoever did it so that we know that it got entered. And once you have completed a night of surveys, before you start handing data sheets to people, or even, putting them in your car for a while or bringing them into your home, please take a photograph of all of the sheets. That is clear and easy to understand. Even with your phone, it will work as a scan, so we have a copy of that sheet, and we got to make sure that we don't lose it. Yeah, so that's about it. If you have any questions, please let me know. Resources on different breeding codes are here. We have lots of information on why we're doing surveys on the website. And if you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We would absolutely love to chat. And if you're looking for protocols for ARUs, those are on their way and being worked on as we speak. So thank you so much for considering doing Western Screech-Owl surveys with PMRA. I think you're doing a fantastic thing, and we're happy to work with you moving forward.